game NBA slate. Some late breaking news right before we're coming on the air. Some guys ruled in, some guys ruled out, the usual. We're going to tell you how to pivot and where to go on this slate. I'm Chris Spags, joined by one of the smartest men in NBA analysis, Fast Eddie Fair. How are you doing, Eddie?
I'm doing very well. How are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm feeling pretty confident about the slate. I think we got some good news, some news which we're going to hopefully give the people some viable pivots about, and we'll talk about it shortly. But we'll do a little housekeeping up front, so we don't have to do it during the show. Let's talk about Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is the top app to use in DFS, where players draft a lineup built of prop bets of only top-tier athletes. You pick 10 props out of 20, and the less probable a prop is to occur, the more money it's worth, and that's where the game theory lies. So if you go to the link I'm going to drop in the YouTube chat right now, you can download the app. You'll get $10 on any $10 deposit, $20 for a $100 deposit, and $50 for $200 or more. So go click that link, join Thrive now. We're doing some fun prop bets today, which we'll talk about shortly. Actually, let's hit one up front. Eddie's still working out his rankings and stuff, but I think you could just give me a quick yes or no over-under on this one.
Sure.
You got Kemba Walker over-under 23.5 points. Kemba's been pretty hot. I haven't projected for 27, so I would go over. What do you think about Kemba tonight, Eddie?
Yeah, I have 26, so I would still take over, unless it's 50 points for over and 150 for under, or some such ratio. I know they weight your selection as far as over or under.
They do weight the selections, but to me, I think that's one thing which I noticed with some of the lineups. I think I'd rather just try to nail the bets as best I can. So I think with one like this, where Eddie and I are both pretty clearly over it, I would say just take the over. Over isn't worth 95 points. Under is worth 105. Don't take the sucker's bet on Thrive. Take the one which you actually believe in, and that is Kemba going over in a marquee matchup versus the Knicks. So go to Thrive now. Go click the link that I dropped in the chat. It'll be bit.ly/ThriveLBL. And again, $10 on any $10 deposit, $20 for a $100 deposit, and a deposit of $200 more will get you $50. So boom, so many ways to win money, and it's all fast release. Go click it, please do it, join it. And also at the end of this video, make sure to like it and leave a comment. It's part of our 24 days of giveaways. Every single day we're giving something away here at awesemo.com. We are giving away this week a 1-month pass to a sport of your choosing. So you get all the premium content for NBA if you're not currently a member, or NHL or NFL, or the rest of the season there. Get whatever you want, or a piece of merch from our shop at shop.awesemo.com. Got a lot of fun items in there that we'll be wearing on camera soon whenever the items are purchased and delivered to my door to make me look even more handsome than I already am. So go like this video, leave a comment telling us which play you're most excited about tonight on the static version of this video, not the one in the live chat. And you'll be entered to win all that stuff, as well as our grand prize on Christmas Eve, which is an all-access pass to all the sports for 1 year at awesemo.com. That's a $700 value. It's a big prize. So go like the video and leave a comment at the end on the static version. How are we looking with your rankings? You feeling good? Feeling good to chat?
Nearly done. Probably 30 seconds. I'm just finishing up, making the final
I'll
adjustment for Alan.
I'll just keep filling the air and doing Muppet faces until we got. Let's talk about the news items really fast that we have so far. Chris Middleton is out. Malcolm Brogdon is out. The Bucks against the Cavaliers becoming a little more attractive as well. Jimmy Butler also ruled out, so it's going to open up some more interest in Furkan Korkmaz, who was a fun play the other night, who I was really over the field on because I felt strongly about. I don't think I got to talk to anybody on the air about that, but I'm excited to go back to the Korkmaz well and have it blow up in my face, but at much lower ownership for me tonight. But Eddie, what are the key news items and how are you handling them so far?
No, I think you basically hit the nail right on its head as far as the pending news there. Obviously, the Milwaukee news is pretty massive. I think that's something we can start talking about that actually. So this is the second time recently that these two teams have gotten together and played. The first time, Giannis very shortly before lock was out, and now we have everybody but Giannis. Well, not everybody, but a couple guys but Giannis. A whole lot of minutes to distribute now with both Middleton and Brogdon being out in the same pretty superlative matchup. Now, without Giannis, they still blew them out. Still handled them pretty well. Basically, no one got quite up to 30 minutes. We got very nice games out of Ersan, got the start in that case. Bledsoe obviously ended up being exceptional, even in limited minutes. In that game, he played, 26, 27 minutes, I think, and had like 47, 48 points. I kind of liked him today anyway. Point guards versus the Cavs is really a thing. Not the best matchup in the universe because of the pace, but now we're talking about a little more usage, and I think as importantly, a chance that this game stays close. If we analyze this slate top to bottom, we would start, especially with some of these early games, with a real possibility of blowout. We have a couple 7-30 games right off the bat with 10 to 14 point lines. I do take blowouts into consideration, not that different from, say, wondering about minutes, because they really end up being the same thing. I know a lot of people say, like, I just sort of ignore blowouts. While blowouts are not predictable, I liken them very much to looking at someone who's, say, playing for the Knicks. Like, if you're talking about Enes Kanter, you're like, okay, I don't know if he's going to get 18 or 37 minutes tonight. That's pretty much the same situation for anybody playing on, say, the Hawks or the Celtics or the Cavs or the Bucks, in just that there's a real chance they get up to number X and a chance they get stuck at number Y. And I don't know why we take that into account when talking about, the coach being an asshat, but don't take that into account and just, there is a greater than average chance that someone gets, there's shit pushed in this situation. When you go back and look at that Bucks game, they were up, 18-20 for most of the game, and so you got, even for the Cavs, of the starters, you had 29, 30, 32 for Sexton was the top, and that's coming down because, again, that was just Dellavedova's first game back, and they're giving him a little bit more, so he might be down at, say, 30 minutes again today. It makes it a little harder to pull that trigger, but, 20 minutes for Rodney Hood, who started that game. And to be fair, the 18 was Tristan Thompson, who got injured. That was the game he went out in. But for the Bucks, the starters played 21, 24, 28, 28, 29. So, that's... and I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm actually saying the contrary, that I think it's a little more likely this game stays together. But also some of the guys who are coming in to take over for Brogdon and Middleton, I expect to be much less involved in the offense. Middleton, even in his abbreviated 28 points just a few days ago in the same matchup. Let's try that again. Middleton, even in his abbreviated 28 minutes in this same matchup just a few days ago, still managed to put up 16 shots. And Broggy Pants put up 12. I think the two guys who are going to start for them are probably Tony Snell and Sterling Brown. And if that's the case, in that same amount of time, rather than those 28 shots, those guys are going to put up about 15. That's a lot of usage that flows around most directly to Giannis and Bledsoe. Additionally, some will get to Brolo, one would think. So as far as how to approach this game specifically from the top, Giannis is now my top scorer on the day. Was close before, but he was down a peg. But just the additional usage does it for me. A rebounding matchup I really like. Greater chance that it stays close. I like getting some exposure to some Giannis. I really like Eric Bledsoe for basically the same reasons. The matchup is tremendous. Again, just performed in this very similar spot, 5 days ago. And then past that, Sterling Brown, I think, is now a really solid value play. Certainly a very good cash play, and especially on FanDuel, where I think he's shooting guard 100 over the minimum. He is your sort of Josh Hart, Contavious Caldwell Pope, etc. guy who slots in there as I do carry an upside, which he does. But I expect him and Snell to eat up most of those minutes. You will get other guys entering the rotation or just picking up extra minutes where you're going to get some extra time out of, probably first Dante DiVincenzo, then probably, what's his nuts? DJ Wilson, George Hill, maybe. But again, Bledsoe's fine, and that's the spot I think they're most trying to go with George Hill. So I don't go with George Hill. Sterling Brown, my first guy there. I don't really want to play Tony Snell, and I think his minutes stay around 24-25, and 24-25 minutes of Tony Snell is not that much better than 24-25 minutes of me on an NBA court. He's not a real productive fantasy basketball player. It'll be interesting to see how much, if any, extra time Ersan picks up here and how much Brolo picks up here. Brolo, I think I still have as a C in cash, but an A in tournaments. So that makes a fair bit of sense. Talk for me for a minute so I can finish updating this crap and get her posted.
Sure. So also, fun thing that just occurred. Apparently, we were on the wrong stream window. People were waiting in the other room, but hopefully people will start migrating now so they don't miss all these things.
I apologize. Josh is out of town. I blame him. Let me be entirely clear.
Sure. Josh is out enjoying life. He's filling in for Osimo in one of the live finals for FanDuel in New York, while Osimo is at the other live final he has down, I think, in Florida right now for DraftKings. So
lovely.
There's a lot of live final action going on. Josh is really excited to see T.I. As part of his festivities at FanDuel. So if you're, for some reason, you're watching this at the FanDuel live final in New York, go find Josh and slap him on the butt. Just give him a little butt slap so he knows it's from us. Let's real fast in the YouTube chat. Spags the Larry Nance call. Yes, that wasn't really the bravest call in the world, but wanted to put people at ease, and that did work out. So thank you for calling that,
Yeah,
Jason.
let's talk about Larry Nance for a minute here. I'm really worried about Larry Nance. Again, he isn't starting
Mhm.
again.
Yep.
And again, I said in the last show, there were two things that concerned me about Larry Nance. One of them is they do everything possible not to give him minutes. Literally, if you go
Hmm.
back over the last month, it's a series of decisions designed to give as little time as possible to Larry Nance. It's oh shit, let's start David Nwaba over him at the 4. Oh crap, let's play 3 guards instead of starting him. Oh shit, let's start Channing Frye at center instead. Like, it's literally, it seems like a conspiracy almost. And then the other thing is, when he's on the court, his usage is remarkably low this year. The number of shots he takes is remarkably low. And both those things happened in the last game. Now, he managed to be productive anyway on the back of 3 steals, 3 blocks, both of which are over what you'd expect out of him. 7 assists, I want to say, was the number that he ended with. Just, managed to put up lots of peripherals and got there. But now also the price is up, and they're clearly still going with screw with him plan A. And plan B, he took 5 shots in that game in his 33 minutes. 5. He made 1. Mm-hmm. He had 3 points. So this was sort of the ceiling. So if you're playing Larry Nance, which I think is fine, he obviously carries a ceiling, understand A, he's going to be more popular than he should be, because most people don't understand reasons 1 and 2. They go, oh my god, look at that, these guys are out, and he went out and got 37, I love him. Well, okay, but he did it despite some things that really could have screwed him. So I guess my point would just be, especially if he's going to be fairly chalky, and take a look at the ownership projections for me, the price on FanDuel is just way out of bounds now. I will happily go any number of other places. The price on DK, I think, is 6,200, is a little more tolerable. But if he's going to be like 20% owned, he is fine to play. But if he's 20+% owned, I would probably try to look other places. If he's 10% owned, all right, at that point, it's a bargain. That can make sense. It's a pace-up spot for the Cavs, as almost every spot is. I do think it is appropriate to understand those concerns.
So he was under 5% on the most recent update I saw. Let me just double check to make sure that's still accurate. I typed in Control F to Nance, which is not going to be helpful to find Larry Nance. He's at 5% right now on DraftKings. So to me, I'm comfortable going above the field there. I also think from watching that game versus Milwaukee when Tristan went out last time, he wasn't used like Tristan, but he did get up 12 shots in that game. I don't think he'll shoot 8 for 12 again, but I do think he'll be needed defensively. Like, can you imagine, like, how is Channing Frye going to stay with anybody on this Bucks side? Like, even
he can stay with Brook Lopez. He can stay with Brook Lopez. That's actually a decent matchup for him. Brook Lopez is a better Channing Frye. Like, Channing Frye is a god-awful rebounder, but he can shoot threes. Brook Lopez is a slightly less god-awful rebounder for a man his size, but he can shoot threes. Like, they actually are similar versions of each other. Rolo is just the simply better one.
Yes.
But he can stay with Brolo. Brolo is not particularly fleet. Now, Brolo is bigger than him if Brolo decides to rebound and box out and crash and back to the basket. But that is simply an unlikely thing for him to do. This team has been built around, one of the reasons they like him there is the fact that he goes well with Giannis, is just getting everyone the hell out of the lane so he can just drive the train through the thing. So they like him the hell out of the way. So I don't expect that to necessarily change. But I like Brolo quite a bit. He can get there the way he normally gets there, or he can get there other ways. I can't really move the mic a lot closer. It's right here. It's 9 inches in front of my face. Speaking of 9 inches in front of my face, I'm gonna let it go. But there was potential for a lot of fun there.
I was wondering where you're going to go with that. I was going
to say, speaking of 9 inches in front of my face, I didn't finish the joke before I started. I was walking through a rest stop last week, and then I heard this weird noise coming from the men's room, but I just let it go. But
yeah, no, it's never candy coming out of the hole in the men's room. That's one important lesson to learn.
Okay, good tip.
Information
that I could have used yesterday, but okay.
I guess my end, some of it is I'm riding with Nance tonight. I think the matchup does fit him well. I think he's going to be needed both defensively and I think offensively he could pick up some usage because they do close out on shooters pretty well. I think that opens a little more opportunity for him that we saw. So, I think it's not a great play if he's not starting. I think that does offer risk, but we saw he gets above 30 minutes. I'm willing to play it one more time because I think he's going to be a 7K player sooner than later, and I'd rather get him while he's still cheap.
Purely an ownership situation for me. It's one of those guys. He has a big ceiling. He can fail. He has a floor, but it isn't as low as it could be because of the fact that it seems most predominantly likely he'll play at the very least into the mid-20s in minutes. He is a productive guy we like the matchup, removing some of the better defenders on the other team. Like there's a number of ways in which this certainly works out for him. So if it's 5%, 10%, yeah, I'm fine to go there. My big thing is looking for guys who have a very real chance of failing, and I think are going to be highly owned and getting away from bad chalk. He's not chalk apparently, and so this I think is sort of moot.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's what we have our projections at. That certainly can change closer to lock depending upon how things shake out with the various guys being ruled in and out. But let's talk about one more game with key injury news before we kind of get to your core plays, Eddie. Philadelphia game, Jimmy Butler is out. We talked before the show. That always makes me want to go to Joel Embiid. I think it's not a perfect spot versus Indiana, but Miles Turner's foul prone. I don't think the defense affects bigs as much as it does the guards. I like Embiid today. I think Simmons interests me. I worry a little bit more about him. And we have Furkan Korkmaz again, who is available. Probably not going to be as chalky as the other day, but probably not as good of a spot to play him as the other day as well. What are we doing with this value on the Sixers, if there is any?
Yeah, confirm for me that Muscala is back in. I did correctly intuit that.
I think he was still a game time decision.
Okay, I thought there was news. I'm gonna go independently.
I'll double check while you talk.
Okay, well, it's going to depend a lot on whether or not Muscala is in. Muscala will play. There you go.
Okay.
So that pulls a few minutes off Furkan for me. I would now project him at 26 or 27. I think he lands in there, and again becomes an ownership question on a large slate. I need to be really convinced of the value of guys to go there, and he's close for me. He's sort of in that middle range where I don't think he's great chalk. I don't think he's horrible chalk. It is worth pointing out that this is not an ideal matchup whatsoever. This is a Pacers team that runs it pretty darn slow, and I believe allows the fewest points per game in the entire league as of right now. So they're a very good defensive team, and that's not great for anyone. So I'm fine with you playing Furkan. I would probably project him for 27 minutes and 21 fantasy points, somewhere in that range, and has been more involved in the offense. Again, looking at that last game, they deferred a fair amount, and so instead of getting 25 shots out of Embiid and 20 shots out of Simmons, and they just tried to take over without Butler there, they were generally fairly deferential, and so you still got, I think, 12 shots out of Furkan or something like that. Like, of the 4 guys who started for that team who took any reasonable shots, they all got a dozen or more, and nobody got more than like 16 or 17, again, off the top of my head. So I like Furkan just fine. There's other value I'm a little more interested in. I like some of the value centers. I think Greg Monroe is a cute play that people won't necessarily immediately flock to. I'm curious what we have an ownership projection for Gregors there. Yeah, so I'm fine with Furkan, and I'm generally bullish about Embiid there. Again, just comes down to an ownership question. If I have Embiid at 20%, I feel very good about it. I think he's in the top 4 guys who have a real chance of being, the highest scorers on the slate. If he ends up being 35%, then I would rather play a lot of other expensive guys that I think you get at low ownership tonight. One guy that I have a fair amount of interest in is John Wall. And I mentioned John Wall before the last game with the Celtics being a spot that I expected him to be very productive. And if he was healthy, I thought he would do extremely well. And he did. And this is another environment that if you think he's in a good position, this is a shot that on paper looks really good to me. And if you think he's healthy, I would expect him to excel in this case. And again, you're hearing a lot of, well, I would rather play Kyrie and I would rather play Kemba. Kyrie and Kemba are both at home playing against woefully bad teams that they've already blown out this year. So, again, this is why I thought of this before. When people would say that to me, I'm like, the John Wall is on the road against the Nets, and that game is like a 2-point line or something. It's double digits in both the Celtics and the Hornets. So you're just dealing with some chance you're getting 3 quarters. So if these guys were all in neutral matchups, or you assured me that they were all going to play 4 quarters, the decisions for those guys would be very close for me, and the discounts you can get on Kemba and Kyrie, depending what site you're looking at, would mean a lot for me versus John Wall. But on the fact that I think Wall is lower owned than both of those guys, and those guys very possibly looking at playing only 3 quarters, I mean, we talk about the Celtics in Atlanta. The Celtics went into Atlanta and dismantled them not that long ago. minus even a couple guys there. And Aaron Baines was originally one of my favorite value plays of the day, and I can't imagine I'm unique in that, but he was a monster in that game. And, in that matchup, even with Baines getting 12 to 14 minutes, I don't mind Bob Williams. I think, he's, I believe, 3,500 on DK and slightly more on FanDuel. He's a really, really good fantasy player. His stats, if you look up his rebounds per opportunity or block shots, etc., he is very Marquise Chris-like, we'll go with, as just having all sorts of fantasy point upside when he gets on the court. And I think even if this game stays close, he probably gets 2 shifts in 12, 14 minutes. And if this game blows out, which is, not impossible, maybe he gets a shift and then the whole damn fourth quarter. So I prefer Greg Monroe, but I certainly have no lack of interest in Bob Williams if you want to roll him out in a tournament.
Yeah, Monroe, by the way, currently projected for 1% ownership. So I think that's one thing I've noticed ownership-wise too, is a lot of times when there's a replacement in the back, like in the backups, people don't really adapt to that too well. Like Gerald Green the other day, not yesterday, but a couple days ago, kind of a similar situation where Eric Gordon got bumped up. And people didn't think, oh yeah, maybe I should go to Gerald Green because he'll get usage. So I think that might hold.
I actually specifically mentioned him in that context where I was like with Ennis going out, and then it was just like, Green probably now plays 20 to 24 minutes instead of the 14 to 16 you were getting most days, and he's still inconsistent as fuck. He can play 24 minutes, get 2 points, a rebound, and an assist. But do I prefer Bob over Tice? Because of their prices, I prefer Bob over Tice. I think you're getting like $1,000 discount everywhere, and I would project them pretty damn similarly. I have no reason to think that, and this happened last game, Baines was back, and people kept asking about Tice, and I said, look, I'm pretty sure Tice plays 14 to 16 minutes. I think he played 14 minutes, so I don't think they want to load him up with minutes. Obviously, the matchup is great. I have no issue with you paying, I think it's 44 for Daniel Tice. I think that's a fine number, and his ownership will be only 2 or 3%, but I would save $900 and play Bob Williams over Tice.
All right, so we touched on the main news items that are kind of relevant with the injuries and lineup shifting around. Who would you say are the core plays you'd want to have in a lineup if you were a person starting from square one today?
Core plays. Well, with all the news, I think it's important to get core plays. Well, that's difficult. It ends up being a little site dependent. Let me. I'll ramble for a minute or two here. So Kevin Knox makes a lot of sense, especially on DraftKings, where that price is still fairly nominal at 4,800. Getting as many as 40, 41 minutes. Last game saw 32 or 33, but that had something to do with foul trouble and with blowout, and should that game stay close especially, you're looking at him taking 40 minutes again. And as I said, going into that last game, he gets his shots. He has not shown, the tendency to just outright defer as a rookie to Enes Kanter and Tim Hardaway or whoever he's sharing the court with. And, as I've pointed out, he basically takes a shot every 2 minutes, which is a pretty decent portion. Again, if you just go back and look at shots per minute, 20 and 37, 11 and 28, 12 and 25, 6 and 20, 25 shots in 41 minutes, and 15 shots in 33 minutes in this last game. That provides a reasonably safe floor just based on volume stats. At this point, he actually ends up profiling as a slightly better rebounding but slightly worse assisting Colin Sexton. Like, they're very similar players in that they're running out there. They're just throwing up a chunk of usage now. But Kevin Knox can actually, I've been fairly critical of Colin Sexton most of this year, and he has just sort of bludgeoned his way into picking up appreciable fantasy points by taking, 23 shots, and his price being low enough that he managed to get up to 35 a couple times, etc. But they profile very similar in that they're guys who are rookies, going to get a pile of minutes, going to take a lot of shots, get some points, and then just very rarely get any extra steals or blocks. So if you're getting off, Kevin Knox, you're doing it for the same reason that these super ceiling games are a little hard to come by. You got one in this exact same matchup, by the way, with Charlotte, which, one game sample isn't the end of the world, but yeah, his 50-point game or what have you was against these Hornets. The other thing I want to mention when you're talking about, say John Wall versus those other point guard studs, no one's on the back end of a back-to-back today, but both the Celtics and the Hornets are on the front end. So, when you're talking about those players, I'm not saying I'm off them because of this. What I'm saying is, there's a lot of reasons to play a guy and a lot of reasons not to play a guy, and a couple of the ones not to play guys, talking about the Celtics and the Hornets and talking about specifically Kyrie and Kemba, is the fact that they're both in very winnable games, very blowoutable games, and they both play tomorrow. So, the leash should be there. And, when the Celtics went into Atlanta, Kyrie had 25 fantasy points in 20 minutes. They just beat the crap out of him. So, that just happened. It certainly could happen again. So, John Wall is not on a back-to-back, is on the road, not at home, which we prefer against his worst team, and is a 2-point favorite or dog or something like that, as opposed to these other games, which have all those negative factors, and I think they're more highly owned. So, yes, there is the concern with Wall that maybe he's not healthy again. Obviously looked great that last game, but, that foot and the Spurs and everything have been difficult for him for some time. But, I'm curious. I'm going to check our ownership rankings, which what those three players are ranked at. Well, we have Mason Plumlee as the highest owned player tonight. That's fine, but I straight up would prefer Trey Lyles. So we'll go there in a second. But sure, let's look at those three players on DraftKings right now. And again, I can't tell you how useful I find these tools. Kemba, 8%. Kyrie, 8%. John Wall, 4%. Hey, look at that. Got it right on the nose. So yeah, they're all literally doubled him. So that's an example of something I look at. I don't chill often, but especially with how predictable basketball is as a sport, ownership projections are everything. And I've looked at least 5 or 6 ownership projection sets, even for companies I used to work for, and this is the first one I've seen that's good. It's also the first one I've ever mentioned. I've literally been doing this for several years, and I've never before said, these ownership projections are great. These ownership projections are great. I'm actually staggered frequently by how close they are and how frequently they get them right on, especially with the multiple updates and all the moving pieces involved in ownership. I'm still... I give credit where it's due, and I'm still fairly aghast at how good the ownership projections are. So, not that my rankings aren't exceptional and all the other things we add to the value, but yeah, the ownership projections are the stone cold nuts there. I am a huge fan of Joe Harris. People have, in general, been underweight in teams against the Wizards. We did get the news that Alan Crabb would be ruled out, so I like Joe Harris, maybe most of the guys on this team, which is not something I frequently say. I don't have him as my highest scorer. I like Dinwiddie, certainly to score a lot more points, has a much bigger upside, has a safer floor even. I like D'Angelo Russell, especially on FanDuel, where he's still way too cheap. He's been productive in this matchup previously, matchups with the Wizards, just all around. I'm a big fan of D-Russ, but Joe Harris does carry a significant upside, and with Crab out, now the minutes are going to push up to... If this game stays close, Joe Harris will play 39 minutes. Like, they really load him up in this situation. The Nets are not on a back-to-back, which is really critical because they're a team that all shit goes sideways when they're on a back-to-back. So I like Joe Harris a lot as a guy here from this here game.
Yeah, it seems fair to me. Some questions in the premium Slack right now. And if you were not a premium member of Awesemo.com, use that promo code LiveBeforeLock that you see on the screen to join to get 1 week free of the ownership projections that Eddie mentioned, as well as rankings from Awesemo as the top player in the world. He was in chat, lovingly giving some advice for free. But that's the generous boss that we have there, Mr. Alex Baker. But go ahead, use that promo code LiveBeforeLock and get in there. Question from Makad in the premium Slack. Are you leaning towards Lyles starting over Plumlee? So let's dig into that more. You mentioned it briefly. Plumlee started last game, a bit of a surprise last minute. Pivoting to him over Lyles was a very profitable play. Today, it could go the other way with Lyles starting and Plumlee being the chalk play. How are you approaching this one, Eddie?
Yeah, I absolutely prefer playing Lyles. I haven't seen any commentary to suggest that Mason Plumlee will get the start again. Now, Mason Plumlee is like right now we have him as the highest projected player on DraftKings. So I'm always looking for reasons to get off him in chalk. But I will say, he's a very productive fantasy player, always gets that backup Jokic time, comes with a reasonably safe floor, $4,300, still $100 cheaper than Trey Lyles, if I recall correctly. So, certainly, I unlikely to completely screw you. So, I'm not telling anyone I was Mason Plumlee, oh, God, what a terrible play. But I think it's more likely, I'll go 60-40, Trey Lyles gets the start here. And I'm on a pretty good streak of this guy will start, this guy won't start. Yeah, Trey Lyles is a really good basketball player who I think in this position starts and plays 32 minutes. So I will go there as opposed to Mason Plumlee, who I think doesn't start and plays 20 to 21 minutes. It depends, obviously, what we get out of Jokic, who I think, by the way, will also go under-owned as a play. You look at the Thunder, you look at Steven Adams and go, this is a really tough spot. I'm a little worried, and that will keep his ownership down. Jokic generally has not had a big problem being productive against Steven Adams. They played earlier this year, and Jokic had, I think, what we can fairly reasonably call a bad game. He only played 27 minutes and had 16.6 assists. 5 assists, 6 rebounds, and a block. That's a pretty derpy game out of him. But if you looked at the couple games last year that he played against Adams and the Thunder, he had triple-double, 29, 14, and 13 with a steal and 2 blocks in one of them, and 23.16 rebounds, 6 assists, a steal and 2 blocks in the other one. So certainly a matchup he has shown a reasonable upside in, and for those games, he wasn't missing, half the goddamn team. So just based on the fact that I expect his ownership to be way, way lower than it should be, I will check. Wow, we have him high. I thought he was going to be in like the teens. We have him projected 26%. So at 26%, now you're balancing. For me there, I'm very ambivalent. I thought he was going to be in the teens before I checked, and at that price, I was excited to go there. 26%, I'm fine with you playing Jokic at say $9,400. That's our DK ownership number. But I totally understand getting away now. I thought he was going to be lower owned than that just because of a somewhat difficult matchup. And again, Oklahoma City, a pretty elite offense at this point, or defense rather. But their pace is still significant enough that it isn't that tough of a matchup. So. Okay, as you were with Jokic, but I do think that, literally we have Lyles currently projected for, let me make sure I math this out, a little bit less than 1/16 of Mason Plumlee's ownership. And,
for me, what I'm doing with Cruncher, I just put a rule in to put Lyles in there and put him only at power forward. And if Plumlee's starting, I'm going to go to Plumlee because I like Plumlee, I think, a little more than you may. I just think he's a very active player, which to me is what I care about from a big. He's going to get rebounds. He's going to get steals. He's going to get a couple blocks. Yeah. Like I had him on my teams last time I was watching the game. In that last minute, he picked up, I think, 2 steals and a block and a board and just crushed value that way. So if he's playing, I want him in there. But I think it's a bad matchup for him versus the Thunder because they could switch on him and he's going to get just beaten down by George and Westbrook on switches. So it seems like a Lyles matchup.
Lyles or Plumlee?
I think he's prepared for both.
Lyles or Plumlee?
For Plumlee, it would be a really bad defensive matchup. Lyles can obviously, his more lithe can stick with those guys, but I think Plumlee's going to have a hard time sticking side to side.
Plumlee came in the last game because of the matchup, I presume. I didn't see, and I looked specifically for comments where Mike Malone was like, this is what I did and why. But they were going against Memphis, who runs a very, very big front court that isn't terribly agile. I guess Jaren Jackson Jr. moves around pretty good, but it was just sort of a size issue. Now you're dealing with Jeremy Grant. I think Trey Lyles is a much better matchup for Jeremy Grant than Mason Plumlee.
Yeah, I agree. So that's why to me, I have Lyles as my placeholder, and I'll switch to Plumlee if the news is that way. But I think that would be how I would want to approach it, especially if you are using an optimizer. It's a pretty easy way to do that and make sure you're good to go.
You do want the starter. And again, this team, this game, pretty attractive for a lot of guys. Jamal Murray, still too cheap, under $7K for the kind of upside that he carries with him. Wancho is $4,700 on DK. That's an absolutely fine price. He was even good in this exact matchup earlier this year. I like him plenty at $4,700. Monty Morris, apparently, the bench guard we want the most, who has the most upside and gets the most minutes. He's getting more time than Malik Beasley and is just better assist guy, better fantasy guy. You get like 0.85 a minute out of Monty and something like 0.7 out of Malik. So, I would certainly go that way. Again, trying to get an ownership difference between 10% and 5% is one thing. Monty Morris, we have almost up at 20%, and that makes plenty of sense of what's still an overly low price for him. But I'm perfectly happy playing Trey Lyles instead. I'm perfectly happy playing obviously Kevin Knox, Greg Monroe, Sterling Brown. I'm trying to think of other value plays that we've been banding around this evening. Joe Harris.
Here's another one that somebody's asking about, I guess in a specific question, but you should talk about him generally too. Dedman or Marcus Morris in a DK TPP. Dedman does come up quite a bit for me projection-wise, but I kind of had to mute that because I don't know if I see it for him, but what do you think about Dedman's prospects and him versus Marcus Morris in particular?
Is Marcus Morris's price that I think maybe Monty Morris is what we're talking about.
I would think so, but it's edited to say Marcus Morris, but that is a $2,000 price difference on DK.
Yeah,
I
Marcus
think
Morris
yes.
is in the mid sixes. Markieff Morris is closer, and I like Markieff Morris plenty. I'm going to take your question and just run a different direction with it, and then come back to it.
Sure.
But I like Markieff Morris plenty. Was put up 40 something when they played Brooklyn earlier this year, and again they're trying to give him 32 33 minutes, and we still have Otto Porter as a game time decision, but just because he keeps getting in foul trouble and keeps screwing up Rosie's spots, which is a good reason in fairness, his ownership keeps going down as well. So Markieff makes a lot of sense for me. I like $5,100 Markieff just plenty. That being said, the original question was Morris or whom?
Deadman or Marcus. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Deadman or Marcus, I don't know how to answer that question because of the price differential, but in general, with Baines back in and getting the start and Hayward back, but him still out, I mean, I'm more excited about Deadman as a play. It's still not a great matchup for Deadman under any circumstances, and he doesn't play in a blowout and, et cetera, et cetera. I imagine he ends up being owned probably around 10%. I mean, we have him double that. So I have basically no interest at double that. I'm going to have trouble with any chalky guys from a game that I think is 50-50 plays 4 quarters. But, again, this game is in Boston. They wrecked him pretty solidly in Atlanta, minus some people too. Horford was out in the exact same game. Baines got the start in that game. Really wanted to play Baines. He was a monster in that game. He played 24 minutes and had, I don't know, close to double that in fantasy points, I think. So
Baines is my dude then.
Yeah, for that, I mean, the fact they said 12 to 15 minutes today is distressing.
That's
but
not enough Baines. Need 20 minutes of Baines to feel good about Baines.
Yeah, 20 minutes of Baines. I'd have projected him for about 30, so I'd have been a pretty big fan of that. But, you still have plenty of other reasonable value guys to look at.
Who would be your FanDuel power forwards for cash outside of Knox?
All right, it might be Draymond. $6,800 on FanDuel is too cheap for Draymond Green. I'm going to go specifically look. That's a good question and give me a chance to talk about a couple other guys. But, the Warriors, even though they're basically all hands on deck, sans DeMarcus Cousins, are only like an 8-point favorite in Sacramento, which, thumbs up there. John Collins, you're paying a premium for, and again, I'm worried about a blowout in that game. You could play Larry Nance. I'd rather not. You could play Serge Ibaka. That's a little better. Sans Valanciunas, we think one of many possibilities is those minutes push up. But Draymond at 6,800, I don't have any specific Sacramento notes. I'm going to do a quick drop, but I top of head think it's been a pretty good matchup for him. You would expect generally teams with some sort of pace, young guys, sloppy teams. It's a team you can get some extra rebounds against. All right, Draymond game log. I'm looking at the last 10 and 34, 35, 35, 39, 44, 42, 48, 50, 51. So nothing under 34 fantasy points. That's pretty cashy for 6,800. There is a game here he played 15 minutes. I presume he got ejected, but he got ejected or injured in one of these games, so I guess that is relevant for looking at cash. But yeah, he's run up, 10 straight of them, 34 to 52. So for 6,800, he's just too cheap. And steals and blocks were 3 on FanDuel. Those were DraftKings numbers I gave actually, so they were probably higher on FanDuel. And again, those steal block numbers, looking at these games, 2 stocks, 4 stocks, 4 stocks, 4 stocks, 1 stock, 4 stocks, 1 stock, 2 stocks, 6 stocks, 3 stocks. So yeah, that's and the 1 stock was the game he played 15 minutes. So yep. So Draymond, I'm a fan of. I'm gonna look at some of the cheaper ones, but he is noticeably too cheap. Still like Von Lin tournaments. Not going to go any further discussing it than that, but still makes plenty of sense. I'd rather not Tice. I'd rather not that. None of the Bucks guys are going to qualify here. I had like 3 people asking me about Chris Boucher today at minimum price. Oregon guy going back to Portland. Maybe he gets the run at center after he just had like 50 points in the G League and set the franchise record, etc. But I do think Monroe plays that backup time there until I hear otherwise. So yeah, I imagine I'm playing Draymond in that other spot.
Lori asking, how do you feel about Oladipo in cash on DK? His price is down. His minutes look okay. How do you feel about it?
Cash is too much for me. The matchup is big upside, big sort of floor. I can see it going both ways. He was massive earlier this year. They played, I think he had 60 something. Certainly wouldn't shock me to see it. 84 and 86 are objectively nice prices for Depot in there, but they said his minutes will be monitored again today. So he played, I think it was 29 in his first game back. This is his second one. You probably get 32, maybe you get 36, and that'll work out. But I don't think he would be a cash play for me. Tournaments make sense for me. I don't think having him cash is the worst idea ever, but I would imagine he would not make my list. I would probably rather play Damian Lillard, for example, at basically the same number.
Speaking of Damian Lillard, I guess what are your thoughts on him tonight? It's not a great matchup. His price is pretty reasonable on DK to the point where he projects well, but I think it's driven up his ownership too much in our projections for me.
Yeah, that's fair. He has played oddly extremely well against the Raptors and against Kyle Lowry for a few years now. And I do have this, went back and watched it earlier today, and he just does not struggle. There are various guys who are consistently defensively exceptional, and then there are guys like Lowry and Ricky Rubio who have a style of defense that is very stymieing to certain opposing point guards and really doesn't do jack against some of the other ones. And, over the last 2 years, these two teams have played each other, twice each year. Your 4 Damian Lillard lines were 32 points, 3 rebounds, 10 assists, and a block. 36 points, 2 and 2, 50 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, and 27 points, 5 rebounds, 11 assists, a steal, and a block. And it looks fine going back even further than that. So it just isn't a thing that has bothered him. And here where you're projecting some sort of narrative, this is still an unbelievably good defensive team. So I imagine the other guys are bothered to a certain degree. So certainly no guarantor of success, but I would probably rather play Damian Lillard in cash. I would certainly rather play Eric Bledsoe in cash in his situation now, I think, and save myself $1,000. But I don't, it's not like Oladipo is a horrific play. So I'd slightly prefer those guys, but there's obviously risks in all these games.
The one thing that worries me about Oladipo a little bit, and I don't know that it'll be proven out, I think we need to see a few more games, but Miles Turner bumped his usage up in that game and then talked afterwards about how his teammates want him to shoot more. I do feel like maybe Oladipo, even if he loses 2% to 5% usage, he gets to be a little bit narrower of a play with him already kind of narrow with minutes being monitored and all that. I don't know. It worries me a little bit about what they want Turner to be doing.
Yeah, I can see, this team can pace down quite a bit. They, can turtle up a little bit. The Pacers just spent a long time learning to play without Depot for a few weeks, so now they're trying to revert back into that, but maybe just as a whole they're not quite as functional. Like, he seems fine. I would not be shocked to see a massive ceiling game out of him here. But it's as a cash question, I'm not really there. As a tournament question, I think he's great, and I don't think he's going to be owned at all. I'm going to guess, I'll say 6% before looking at what we have projected. We have 2. I'm going to say it comes in over 2, but yeah. So I'm fine with him in tournaments. Cash, I generally think there's a little bit too much uncertainty for me when I want to spend $8,500 on a guy. Again, I'd rather throw the same amount of money at Lillard, who, again, I think I've demonstrated does still carry some sort of upside even in a tough matchup at home, but also projects to be fairly safe unless you think they get absolutely wrecked, which is a possibility. This is a Toronto team that, without Kawhi, went into Oracle and just crushed that team. So certainly that would be a reasonable concern to have about any Kawhi exposure you might have.
Also, people in the Slack talking, I think everybody's figured it out now that ownership's been updated, but in case you were curious and you're not in the premium Slack right now, ownership was just updated within a few minutes, so those are the most recent numbers we have.
I am hitting refresh because I don't know if I think I was reading from the old numbers.
Yeah, they came through while you were talking, but people are asking questions. Yeah. Let's see, Embiid or Giannis, who would you go with?
I really don't know. I will go with Giannis, as I currently have him projected a point higher, and I have them both as the top 2 plays on the slate now. But I will say Giannis, but I'm perfectly happy with either one. Yeah.
Bledsoe or Russell for a DK GPP, which would you go with?
Yeah, that's a close one. I mean, it depends. If you're playing, I would have them very similar for GPPs. It really depends whether or not you're playing, Cavs or Wizards in your lineup and would try to stack that up a little bit if possible. But basically even for me on those two.
Who would be your favorite mid-price center on FanDuel?
In tournaments, Brook Lopez. In cash, Jared Allen. Again, and not that I mind Jared Allen, but for cash, I'll probably save the $500 and roll out Brolo. But I don't know, actually. It'd be one of those two guys. It'd be either Jared Allen or Brook Lopez for me. If I can go all the way up to Steven Adams, I think that's also a fine cash play. But the two guys I would want to play more in either cash or in tournaments would be Brolo or Jared Allen. Probably Jared Allen in cash, Brolo in tournaments a little bit more, but both very close in both. Jared Allen is in a pretty good spot here, and Washington doesn't rebound or do much of anything well. So,
let's see where the question goes. Oh, Bishan asking, what would you project for Redick tonight?
Yeah, I still am trying to, I was trying to figure out his spot exactly previously. I don't like or dislike Redick at this point. Again, they were very egalitarian with their offense last time, so he ends up in that game being just sort of your more expensive TJ McConnell, Furkan Korkmaz. So I think he's fine, but he's more of a tournament play for me based on what I saw last game. I think he's fine in tournaments, and there is a real chance that he does pick up the extra minutes I was hoping for and does take extra shots, but last time they were very even-handed about it.
People asking about Pat Connaughton starting. Would you play him or Sterling Brown?
Is Pat Connaughton starting?
I believe he was in one of the lineups, yeah. Yeah, Bledsoe, Connaughton, Snell, Giannis, and Brolo.
Interesting. So they didn't start. They did not start Sterling Brown. So the question is, would I rather start Connaughton or Sterling Brown? I guess you have to play Connaughton in cash now, but I would still play Sterling Brown in tournaments.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We've seen how starting Pat Connaughton can just get no usage at all, and I think Bledsoe has been loving usage lately, and Giannis, I think, in a spot where he can crush. Seems like there's a lot of usage being taken off the table in that starting group, where Sterling Brown's competing with nobody.
Yep. No, I think that is the case.
Is Marcus Sol okay for cash on FanDuel?
Interesting. Let me check my projection. Is he still 7,700 or is he still in the sevens or something? Let me find that number. 8,100. Is he okay? He's okay. Points per dollar, I probably prefer him a little less than a couple of the other guys around there. He is probably better in cash than Nurkic just because he is at the exact same price because he is a little bit safer there. But I'm a little more inclined to play one of those spend down guys. But yeah, he's fine for if you're paying up at center in cash. That's the right place to go.
All right, going back to the premium Slack. Thoughts on Bagley and CJ on DraftKings?
I'll assume CJ means McCollum. More of a Lillard than a McCollum spot for me due to just McCollum being a little more out on the wings. It being a good Lillard spot by definition meaning not the best McCollum spot because there is a real alpha beta thing there. So McCollum just played Memphis again. And McCollum against Memphis is this really weird thing. But, 4 of his last 5 games, McCollum has, 45 to 55 against the Grizzlies. I got to go back and figure that out before they play again. But this is more of a Lillard spot for me. So, there's never a day it's wrong to play McCollum in tournaments. He's, again, a poor man's Klay Thompson, basically, where you can just get 30 and a quarter. But not a spot I'm particularly trying to play him. Bagley, again, the price has come up. He's no longer, he's come up $1,000, basically, since his last game. I still don't have an issue with it in tournaments. Again, I was a pretty big fan of $4,700 Bagley there, $4,600 Bagley, $5,700. I still don't have an issue if you do it. He did score 40 something when they played the Warriors earlier this year, but that was an understrength Warriors team. When they played earlier this year, there was no Steph and more importantly no Draymond, so I would not expect a repeat. But on a slate this size, at what I expect to be 2% ownership, if you have Bagley or CJ McCollum in your lineups, that's fine. I'm not what a great spot for those guys, but so I'm thoroughly ambivalent.
Apparently Rodion's Kurucs is starting. I don't. It's coming from Rinpack in the premium Slack. I don't see a tweet about it. But...
yeah, they'll. I imagine it's. That makes sense. So they'll start RHJ and Allen at the bigs, and they'll start Russell, Harris, and Kurix. Kurix is a reasonably fantasy-friendly game. Moving into the starting lineup of and by itself doesn't help him, but the real question is, that's very interesting. He makes a perfectly reasonable point. I imagine he is basically sitting at the very minimum on DK. I think someone can check for me that I did remove him from the rankings because I wasn't sure. $3,200 on DK. Kurix makes plenty of sense. Cash probably slightly better than $3,300 Sterling Brown now, if I'm remembering that price correctly. But still the Nets tend to be pretty even-handed with minutes, so I imagine you're getting something to the order of, I don't know, I'll say 24 minutes out of Kurix. He'd been playing in the teens for a while, so don't mind Kurix. I mean, you look at the last game, he played 19 minutes off the bench against the 76ers, got 20 fantasy points. It can certainly happen. And again, I'm a big fan of guys against Washington, so guys against Washington, all the Nets will be under-owned versus what they should be. Everybody from RHJ, who people toyed with for a while, you can go back there now again without Alan Crabb, and against Washington, I like Joe Harris if he happens to slot into your lineup. I don't mind Rodion Skurix. I obviously like D'Angelo Russell. I like getting some exposure to Jared Allen. Some of these guys will be good. This is a Washington team that doesn't defend and doesn't rebound, and that helps the opposing.
Let's see what's going on in the premium Slack. We got question: better combo for DK Cash, Korkmaz and Embiid, or Kevin Knox and Jokic?
For Cash, I have to go with the Embiid side there. Sadly.
Draymond Green or Ibaka in a DK GPP?
I'll go with Green for what I consider to be a similar or greater upside and what I expect to be lower ownership. So, Ibaka, I expect to be a little chalkier. You take Valanciunas out of there, people will try to correlate that into being a thing. But
Wall or Curry for a DK GPP?
Really depends on the rest of your team. Curry is objectively a better play and will be higher owned. So go with correlation, go with whether or not you're attempting to take a larger risk. But really depends what else you're doing with your lineup there. Tough spot for me to answer.
Siakam or Jared Allen in a DK GPP?
So you're hoping Kawhi sits. I think if Kawhi is out, try to leave yourself the option. Again, Brooklyn doesn't play until I think 7:30. So if we get news between 7 and 7:30 that Kawhi won't play, then the answer is clearly Siakam. Before that, I will probably assume Kawhi plays, or at least realize there's a decent chance, and go with Jared Allen. But that's pretty close.
Mm-hmm. Got call on Kawhi. Do you think he plays?
I do, as he was obviously, close 2 days ago, and apparently somewhat close the day before that. If he's woefully out of contention, you don't wait until 10 minutes before lock to rule him out, or an hour before lock. So it's been an additional 48 hours. So with no inside information whatsoever and just my intuition, yeah, I presume if he was fairly close 48 and 72 hours ago that he's probably there now. But so gut call, yes. Gun to my head, will he play? I'm going to say greater than 50% he plays. But obviously the second game missed makes it much murkier, and they just may have a procedure where it doesn't matter how screwed up you are unless your leg actually falls off. They just evaluate you 90 minutes before tip, and you're like, no, I'm still jacked up. All right, he's out. I guess that's possible, but it seems more likely to me in my recollection of how Toronto usually runs things that, yeah, I think he will play.
Do you think Lowry sits?
Is there a reason to expect him to?
He's questionable.
How did I not know Lowry was questionable?
He got changed at some point in the day, but yeah, he's been questionable.
Somehow I must have missed that. Oh yeah, he's back. There it is. Somehow that got past me. I've just gotten this news a second ago, so you know as much, if not well more than I do. So I will not give a take on whether or not Kyle Lowry will sit. I will say it would surprise me if Kawhi sat. If he sat.
Yeah, I think they both play tonight, but I thought I would play one of those two games in that back-to-back, and that was wrong. So.
As did I, my friend. As did I. More on the other nice thing about the Sterling Brown play is, okay, so he's not starting now, but he would be playing an eventual blowout, which is still not horrifically unlikely. They did just recently blow them out, and I imagine I will click and check what Sterling Brown had in that game. With the blowout, Sterling Brown played 31 minutes in that game, which I'm pretty sure was his season high, and had 26 fantasy points. So you are just, as an example, someone was like, I don't know why I'd play Brown now because he's not starting. It's like, well, he's still going to get appreciable time. Not starting generally could mean some extra usage. That's less time on the court with Bledsoe and Giannis, but not, a play you should be over the moon with. But I still like Sterling Brown for that reason.
Would you go Curry, Monty Morris, or Westbrook and Kurix for DK Cash?
One more time. It broke up a little.
Curry and Monty Morris or Westbrook and Kurix for DK Cash?
Curry and Monty Morris. Can't cash right now with my guy.
With the Kerr man? We need a name for the big rod.
I actually meant with Westbrook based purely on his. I mean, he's not looked good. Like, he's got real shooting issues right now. And so, yeah, I mean, I have what I think is legitimate concern for his ability to turn that around entirely. Any
thoughts on Jamal Murray on DK?
I like him. I'm a big fan. I mentioned before, 6,900, half the damn team is missing. Matchup not certainly ideal, but certainly acceptable. So, yeah, me like.
Curry and Kurix or Wall and Harris for cash on DK?
Curry and Kurix. Got to go with the better cash expensive guy.
Is Connaughton a good pivot off of Korkmaz?
He's a pivot off of Korkmaz. Not super upside guy, so good pivot. You may be asking a little much there, but he is a reasonable pivot. I don't look at him and go, I can't wait to get some Patty C in my life, but not unusable. And we are locked.
Bledsoe Marvin or Lillard and Kurix for FanDuel. That doesn't matter now.
We are locked. Well, it matters if it's. He said FanDuel actually, so you're right. It does not matter now, probably. So
yeah. Same for this guy. Thoughts on Muscala and a FanDuel GPP? I guess thoughts in general, just for prosperity.
I would have been fine with playing Muscala in that context. And again, FanDuel, he's the kind of play you want to have there. Potentially can pick up some extra minutes. A guy who carries enough of an upside at a position that isn't that great. Again, I would rather play Trey Lyles, but on FanDuel, you're spending an extra grand. I'd rather play Noah Vonleh. There's a couple guys I like a little bit more because I think they carry a bigger upside, but I wouldn't look at Muscala in a FanDuel tournament and think that there's anything objectively wrong with it.
All right, so I guess now is the time to play America's favorite game to close out this week of shows, this week of NBA analysis. Play What Daddy Likes. Let's find out on this Friday evening what Daddy likes. That's the object of the game and the name, so it's really easy to figure out.
All right, I'm downloading. We'll go with DraftKings and take a look at how guys ended up being owned.
Protagonist asking why no update on ownership. There was an update on ownership at 643, which we talked about. I don't know what you're asking for.
And no big news since then either. So I don't think there was any significant news. Kurix will start. I guess we could have updated again with Rodian's Kurix news.
Yeah, but sometimes stuff like that takes a little too long. The hamsters on the wheel don't necessarily generate that fast when you have a Rodion's Kurix entering the lineup. But even still, I would imagine his ownership won't get insanely high. Probably higher than the 1% we have him at now. But that was so late. He won't get above 10, I don't think.
Oh, no. He'll get 4. 4.5 maybe. Against Wizards is nice. I mean, I legit like him still. Okay, so here we go. The chalk of the 7 p.m. games. Again, they're all of 2 of them, so not a ton of guys here, but Kevin Knox, 39%. Yep, I think we projected 38, so we're off by a percentage point there or something. Otto Porter is out. They managed to time that nicely, so again, that game doesn't start for a while, so you have chances to load some Kurix in there, but Otto Porter being out, obviously Jeff Green has shown he carries an upside with him. When that occurs, certainly Oubre is still too cheap on DK for what he can certainly do, and it makes me like Markieff a little bit more still in 5,100. Chief Keef still makes some sense for me. Kevin Knox 39, John Collins 14, Kemba Walker 13, so a bit more than we thought. Tim Hardaway 9.4. Jeremy Lamb, a guy I didn't talk about, who I certainly didn't mind if you played at 9%. Deadman at 8%. Marcus Morris at 7. Kyrie at 6. Okay, so Kemba, we had 8 and 8. We ended up with Kemba at 12. Kyrie at only 6. Again, I think you do get Wall lower than that, but Wall was also especially nicely priced on FanDuel, so slightly bigger fan of the play there, obviously. Moutier 4.5, Ntilikina 4.1, Cantor 3.7. We went to Nick's row here. Bazemore 3.4. I like that, even in a terrible matchup. Still Sans Torian Prince. Daddy likes Kent Bazemore at that number.
He's doing that in every matchup. He's been right there, that 30 to 35 range.
Yep. Kevin Harter 3.2. Again, just objectively too cheap, so I don't hate that. Trae Young 3.2. Daddy likes at that price. Marvin Williams 2.75. Marcus Smart 2.3. Again, Jaylen Brown was in. Terry Rozier 2.3. Daniel Tice 2.2. Oh, that's right, my guy Bob Williams coming up at some point here. Gordon Hayward 2.2. I like that. Daddy likes. Nicholas Batum 1.9. Cody Zeller 1.8. Noah Vonleh 1.8. Bob Williams 1.5. Daddy likes. Again, we mentioned him. Jaylen Brown 1.3. Aaron Baines 1.3. Yeah, he can score 30 fantasy points in 15 minutes. Like, that's not impossible in this matchup. Bembry 1%. Jeremy Lin 0.9. Okay. Tony Parker 0.8. Courtney Lee 0.3. Miles Bridges 0.22. Hazonia 0.21. Malik Monk 0.19. I actually didn't mind Malik Monk. You're talking about, again, potential blowout. He's 3,200, 3,300 or something. That made a fair amount of sense to me. So I actually wouldn't have hated a little bit of Malik Monk. MKG 0.2. Guillermo, Sweet Dick, Willie Hernan Gomez 0.13. Frank Kaminsky 0.12. Mitch Robinson 0.12. Len 0.11. Semi Ojale 0.07. What the hell are you people doing? You could tell me starting and playing 48 minutes, and if he cost the minimum, I'd really have to sit there for a while and decide if I wanted him. Vince Carter 0.07. We were playing there was a game, I think it was the end of the preseason. Might have been early in the season. Either way, lots of bigs are out for the Pacers, and TJ Leaf gets the start. And people are all over TJ Leaf, and I'm like, don't play TJ Leaf. He's a terrible, terrible fantasy basketball player. He's not a very good basketball player, but he's a really bad fantasy basketball player. And that led to a game that night where I think I gave away $100 in cash in a game show I called, Can You Name People Who Are Worse Than TJ Leaf? And literally, the game was, TJ Leaf at that point had played, 653 career minutes and averaged 0.645 DraftKings points per minute. And on the honor system, you had to name someone who had played at least as many minutes but had fewer fantasy points per minute than TJ Leaf. And it's hard. Like, you think about the worst fantasy basketball players you can who have played at least, like a year of basketball. Again, you had to get up to, 600 minutes. So for a backup, that's a year-ish. And it was really difficult, but the worst name that got come up with the whole night was Semi Ojale, who in his career averages 0.46 fantasy points a minute or something. It's an incredibly bad number. So 0.07.
Great muscles, though. Real strong dude.
Yeah. No,
I would do his workout.
Strong like a bull. Vince Carter 0.07, Bacon 0.2, Damian Dotson 0.02, Trey Burke 0.01. Congratulations. You played yourself. Shout out also Al Horford 0.00.
If you are playing on DK, I think this question is relevant with Otto Porter being out late. How much Jeff Green would you be going to?
He's up to 44. I will look, but he's got he came up. He came on up. He's over 4 on both now. I know they bumped him after his big game. Yeah, he's 43. Yeah, that obviously worked really well, and this is Brooklyn. That game went to overtime, it's worth pointing out, so he played 45 minutes. But again, Washington not on a back-to-back, so applying the same logic. How much would I go to? You'd have to compare him to certain other plays, but I think he is still objectively underpriced. I'd probably have to project him now for I'll go 31 minutes and somewhere around 25, 26 fantasy points, which feels fine. I would still rather play Trey Lyles at lower owned and $100 more. But Jeff Green is objectively a good play now, and not enough people do late swap, so I would have no issue with you swapping into some.
All right, last question before we call it a wrap on this business week. Would you go, I guess these are just thoughts, Mo Harkless thoughts and Derek Jones Jr. thoughts real fast for Fat Jesus?
Yeah, I like Mo Harkless plenty. Obviously, the matchup isn't ideal, but the price is down, and just rested a game. And I do check my notes. I was of the impression. No, they don't play. No, Portland isn't on a back-to-back. It's the Celtics, the Hornets, I think the Grizzlies and the Thunder are the 4 teams that are on a back-to-back. So Mo Harkless is fine to play in tournaments. He can do steals, box threes, get all the random pieces, and is still cheap enough. He's gotten there a couple times this year, so I'm fine with Mo Harkless. Again, largely ambivalent, but if I saw him in a tournament, I'd be like, okay, I can see that. What was the other one?
And Derek Jones Jr., who's had a couple big weeks, and DK was touting on one of their articles today, which I was a little surprised by, but Derek Jones Jr.
I'm presuming he is incredibly cheap, so I get that, but he's Derek Jones Jr. and Hassan Whiteside is back, and Memphis, so especially if DK is touting him on their show, which, again, I don't think they should even do. When you offer the contest, you shouldn't also offer advice on how to beat the contest. It always feels a little weird to me, but that being said, I'm not wanting to do it. Like, he's a big. The bigs are all there. Like, Dragic isn't there, and Wade isn't there, and Deion Waiters is still out, but all the bigs have reported. So, no airplane mode for me.
Yeah, no, I don't see it. I think he's gotten kind of lucky in those games. My dogs are, like, going nuts right now.
Yeah, there's some significant noise there.
They are over this. Yeah, people, I mean, he had one big day that was an outlier day where he picked up, like, a bunch of blocks and some steals, and you can't bank on that ever, and I don't think you bank on his minutes.
Yeah, either. That's not even his forte, his milieu, if you will.
Yeah, but I support DK Live touting things, though, because I do their show and was on it yesterday, and they're lovely people over there.
I know a good 20 people personally who work at DK. I like them as a company. I understand why they do it, and I'm sure it's a wise business policy. I'm a big wife of Caesar must appear pure kind of guy, having worked in the industry for 8 or 9 years, and
right.
Yeah, I will stick with it feels weird to me. Whenever they're like, hey, we set these salaries, here are the ones we screwed up. I'm always like, yeah, that just feels weird. But again, I've been setting DFS salaries every day for many years, so I'm sure I have a not traditional take on the situation. So, just saying.
I think we can all agree, though, that they make great choices in talking heads to pop in there. And in fact, they should put more of those talking heads on their TV shows. I think that's what we should all agree on that.
Okay, what you said. I'm not trying to mess up your thing. I'm always here up to lock, so I'm never there. So.
Yeah, so go check that promo code live before lock if you want to talk to Eddie in the premium Slack. I'm sure he'll be hanging out a little bit.
True.
This weekend. Eddie, you're on both days?
Oh, I presume so.
All right, Eddie's on both days. I will be here tomorrow doing the On the Contrary show with Evan Silva and Osmo doing NFL. Really the best NFL show in the world. I think it's safe to say that.
That's what I'm told. Daily. Yeah, that's what I hear.
Yeah, it is the most popular show on our YouTube channel for a reason, and that reason is this face right here. it's probably because you have Osmo.
It's Evan and Osmo, but
yeah, maybe. I mean, look, somebody's got to make the Jameis Winston jokes, and that's me. That's where my responsibility falls. So tune in for that. Watch Eddie this weekend. Watch me and I think EMAC on Sunday morning because Josh is on his little vacation, his little jaunt. He's getting his groove back. So don't forget to slap him on the butt at the FanDuel final.
Getting his groove back was funny. I did that.
He's got to travel. He's actually hooking up with Tay Diggs right now. Hopefully Tay Diggs slapped him on the butt, and that's how it all began.
Okay. I don't know what's with you and Josh's butt, but that's the third Josh's butt mentioned this show.
I just think it'd be funny if somebody went up to him on the FanDuel thing and were like, "Hey, Josh," and then they were like, "Oh no, Spags told me to do it."
No, that's fine. If you can get that working, good luck. I don't know how many people are at the final for other sports listening to our basketball show, but if you hit, I'll be like, okay, good job. I didn't think you could get there. So.
We actually have heard positive reviews for our shows at those events, where which is Tom and Eddie were kind enough. Other Eddie 1-800 Eddie.
Yeah.
Were kind enough to pass on, but so people do talk about us there. Maybe one person's watching on their phone, and then Josh is getting himself a little tap, a little love tap,
a little something.
A little something. That's it for us. Make sure to like this video. Leave a comment just telling Eddie and I how great we are. And you'll be entered to win the 24 days of giveaways. That's 1 month to any sport if you're choosing at awesemo.com, or a free piece of merch from our new store. A lot of them were handcrafted by me with love, so they're cool and real above board, real gnarly stuff.
I thought we had a sweatshop.
Well, they make it. But I design it, and I crack a whip on some poor children, some 10-year-olds who just have to put it together for you every time you place an order. And you'll also be entered to win a year-long all-access pass to awesemo.com on Christmas Eve, $700 in value. So like this video, leave a comment telling me and Eddie how great we are, in the static version of the YouTube video, and you'll be entered to win. So that's it. Any parting words, Eddie, before we wrap this up?
Nope, sounds good. See everyone over the weekend. We'll try to do as well as last weekend. Was very sexy. Go James Harden yesterday. That worked out. I was a big James Harden over LeBron guy.
I was too.
I was a big Trevor Ariza guy too, which was funny because I don't know who it was, but someone on the show earlier in the day was saying, "Don't play Trevor Ariza. He's terrible. Don't play Trevor Ariza." And I was like, "Yeah, I think he's one of my favorite tournament guys." And he went off. So that feels good when you can get a play right and apparently humiliate one of your coworkers. I don't know who it was. I apologize, but somebody.
Yeah, I was 80% Harden, but 60% Melton, so it kind of came out in the wash.
I like Melton. It's good to see that downside is there, but it's very similar to the Knox thing. I doubt it holds the rest of the year, but to that point, you were looking at several games in a row with, okay, that's a butt ton of minutes and opportunity. Matchup isn't that bad. I got to go, until it falls off the way. Like, that was the way it wasn't going to work out. He has a bad game, and the minutes get cut, and he gets, Jalen Brunson like that, if you will. But he was whatever, 65% owned. At that point, it made sense to go. It made sense to go away. It turned out going away was the play.
That was one where the eye test was not there. Like, he still did a good job. He got a couple steals. Like, he did make value for himself. He just didn't shoot the ball.
I don't think he scored. Yeah, he had like 5 stocks, a couple assists, some rebounds, and no points. Like, he just did not make any buckets. Yeah. But otherwise,
could not handle Dennis Smith at all. Dennis Smith was all over him. He was playing like really motivated on D, and Melton just couldn't get space at all.
Yep.
Like, not even a little.
No, exactly. I was watching that game, and we talked about Dennis Smith. He didn't end up being tremendous. He had 25 for his. He was meh on the late slates, but. It was an interesting game. All right.
He can be a bulldog when he dedicates himself. But there you go. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck out there. We'll see you all again soon.
Bonsoir.